Let's talk supply chain. So, welcome to the show, Ashley.
Hi, Sarah. How are you?
I am so good and I'm so excited to have you here. I mean, I always get so excited when I meet women who are passionate about sustainability, inclusion, and doing their best to make the world a better place. And you and I think we could talk for hours.
I know we were just talking
And
for 15 minutes.
yeah, and I can't wait to find out more about you. And literally, we only met in September, and I feel like I've known you forever. And I'm just so excited to introduce you to our community and for more people to learn more about you and get to know you and all that kind of stuff. So, let's take it all the way back to the beginning because supply chain careers are never linear and have
No.
all sorts of beginnings. And that's part of what I love so much about supply chain. And you have a degree in mathematics. So what was your dream when you were younger? Was it
Yeah,
supply chain? I mean,
it was not.
what did you want to do?
Yeah, I was raised by two entrepreneurs. I had a mom
Mm.
who ran her own catering business, and I had a dad that was an architect. So actually relatively creative careers in a lot of ways. So
Right.
I didn't know, like I actually didn't know a ton about supply chain or things, how to make things or any of that. I knew I had a skill set in the math and science arena. And when I
Okay.
went to college, right, like everyone, when you go to college, everyone's like, you got to pick a path, and it's like really scary, especially when you have an older sister who chose her career at a very young age. She wanted to be a doctor, and she is a doctor.
Nice.
Um, yeah, I didn't know what I
That
wanted to
wasn't
do.
me.
Yeah, not me. So I went into college actually thinking I was pre-vet. I wanted to work with animals. I really enjoyed animals and I knew
Okay.
I was good at sciences. And so I kind of went that route and I ended up being placed in a program with mostly pre-med women, um, which was intense. Like if you can
Yeah.
imagine a bunch of pre-med women all kind of living together and studying together.
Yeah.
Um, and quickly found out that science wasn't actually my passion. Like science
Okay.
felt like we were memorizing a lot, and I was always strong in mathematics.
Mhm.
And I had a strong emphasis in problem solving. I really understood
Mhm.
how to solve a problem.
Mhm.
And I didn't come to supply chain until I interned at Toyota. I picked parts in our parts distribution network for Toyota sales. So
Oh, cool.
anybody that's fulfilling like you go in and you need a check on your car. I was the warehouse that was fulfilling that order. That's
Nice.
what I started in. And I met a woman. I met one of my mentors, Jane Basita. She was the vice president of customer service at Toyota Motor Sales, and she walked through our warehouse, and I said, "Oh, can I talk to you about something? Like I don't know what I'm doing. I seem to like it here. Can we
Uh-huh.
talk a little bit more about career and
Awesome.
future?" And she was the one that looked at me and heard about my skill set in math and everything like that and my passions. And she was like, "Hey, I think you'd be really good in supply chain." I was like, "Okay,
Wow.
yeah." So that's how I kind of came to be. Someone told me that I'd be good at it, and that's where I started. So
That is awesome.
yeah.
When you say math and science, I get a little bit like sweat is pouring down my because math and science was not my forte. And actually, I was in French immersion. And so I
Oh my
learned
God.
math and science in French all the way up to grade 11. And then they switched it to English courses, and I was lost. I was never destined to be a mathematician or a scientist because let me tell you, the terms between French and English did not work for me.
I can't imagine. I can't imagine.
So I was in like the lowest of the low classes by the end of high school for math and science,
Listen,
only purely for the fact that they changed languages on me.
yeah, well, I mean, you can sit in a math class. I was a math major, and I sat in multiple classes where I didn't know that they were speaking English. Like you're sitting there like, what? I took a class in college that was chaotic theory. So it was
Wow.
about studying systems that tend towards chaos.
Wow.
And like you sit there and
No
you're
wonder you're in
like
supply chain.
it lended myself, right? A lot of what I talk about with my team is management systems to put pressure
Right.
on systems because the third law of thermodynamics tells us every system wakes up, entropy, it's called entropy, right? Every system wakes up to fall apart And that
Right.
is what's happening every single day in our processes in
That is
supply chain.
awesome.
Yeah.
I love that. So you talked about Toyota and you talked about your time at Toyota. Other than meeting this woman and her saying you need to be in
Yeah, you
supply
could.
chain,
Yeah.
what did you learn about working at a company like that? Because at the end of the day, I believe they're lean, are they not?
Yes. Yeah. So I got immersed right away. So keep in mind, like, I don't know what I was making, but $10 an hour is probably more than
Right.
that. But I picking parts in a warehouse, and I had at the very first time I set foot in the building, I understood the great care that we had to take to make sure our customer was satisfied, right? Like, so
Huh.
something about
Okay.
lean is about what is it that the customer really wants, and
Yeah.
how do we make sure that we're providing them the best value?
Mhm.
And in my training, right, I wasn't allowed to go out on the floor. I was like, they put you in this little area to make sure that you can pick apart correctly and you're
Okay.
matching the numbers correctly and you're sorting it correctly for the right dealership. So there's a great amount of care that comes into you understanding your job
Wow.
is really about customer service. It's really about how the customer feels. So I had a really great appreciation for customer. And on top of that, there was an expectation in my hourly job
Mhm.
that I was root causing every gap that was in my day. So for example, um, lean teaches you about tack time, right? The customer beat. I understood that I had to pick 5 batches within 1 hour. And
Okay.
every time I finished a batch, I'd put a magnet down and I could see if I was on pace to hit my tack time. If I didn't hit tact, it was my job to understand why I didn't hit tact. And
Why?
it wasn't because I was walking slow or I had
Right.
to, it was because potentially is because I had to pick 100 tiny gaskets in this batch that slowed me down. And I had to on the board write my root cause. And then I would talk about it with my leader on how we can maybe improve next
Wow.
time. Same with quality. If I made a quality error in my sort, so I'm sorting, the sort station was about what container went to what dealership. So it was really easy, if you can imagine, if you were talking in the sort station to sort to a different dealer.
Yeah.
And so you would get a report back that said you messed up these 2 orders, which was
Mhm.
also just like, oh man, like
Right.
when you know that the customer is so important, you mess somebody's car up that
Yeah.
weekend or whatever,
Right.
you would go back and research. So it's like, well, what did I get wrong? Did I
Huh.
get the quantity wrong? Did I maybe talk too much in the sort area? What was it that went wrong? And it was my job to problem solve and do better next time,
Huh.
which I think is really a lean culture is really about seeing a difference between plan and actual, and solving that problem at the root cause. And it is accountability of everyone, not just leaders.
So I think you hit that nail on the head, like accountability and responsibility of self
Yes.
rather than shame.
Yeah.
So if you think about somebody making a mistake, right, in any organization, the
Mhm.
first usual go-to is shame, right? The
Right.
person feels shame. The person that is like, oh, we can't make these mistakes,
Right.
contributes to that shame. But taking that shame and turning it into results driven accountability and responsibility, where the person has to take their own accountability and responsibility. It's not up to somebody else to make them do that. Is huge. That's a really, really big learning lesson, and something that is huge to anybody's career, not just in supply chain, but really just in general of how
Yeah.
to move through mistakes. Because I
Yep.
find that a lot of people don't know how to move through that mentally.
Yeah.
When we do make mistakes, whether you're the person who is talking to the person who made the mistake or whether you're the person who has made that mistake.
Yes. Here's the thing. We just talked about systems wake up and want to break on us, right? Like
Right.
it even like humanity is about making mistakes. We are going to make mistakes.
Yeah.
And the best thing we can do is just do better next time
Yeah.
and understand what we've done and do our best. And that's kind of what I was taught was, hey,
Love that.
there's usually a reason, and then the reason is typical process. It's not because
Right.
of me. It was process or procedure that we had to maybe modify
Yeah.
and get better at. And it could be things. I remember we had one of my errors, I can't remember, was probably a quantity error. And one of the solutions we put in place is when I got my batch of tickets, this is before scanners, so I'm aging myself a little bit, but you would get your batch of stickers to put on each little baggie. And the first thing I would do is I would scan that batch of stickers for anything over a quantity of one, and then I
Okay.
would highlight it with a highlighter. And so what that did was just triggered it in my brain that I had to pay attention to that sticker as I
Right.
was picking that part. So there was like little things that you could do in your process just to help yourself and do better.
Yeah.
And yeah, you're personally accountable. Like no one was out there policing me.
Right.
No one was watching me put stuff into bins, right?
Right.
And it was my job. It was my accountability to meet
Huh.
expectations. I had to figure out how to do better. So
Love that. Love that. So where did you go from there? You've had a few, career jumps.
yeah.
So talk to us about where you went from there.
So I spent some time at Toyota. I moved around. It took me into my job in the warehouses took me to a strategic planning department in
Okay.
our corporate office at the time was in LA. They've moved since, but it was in LA. I worked in LA for a little bit, and that was really cool. It was a way to match my math degree with work. I was
Mhm.
looking at the size of cars on the road and the size of cars we were servicing and what was happening with the part size. So if you think about a
Okay.
Camry in 98 versus a Camry in 2004, the car got bigger, right?
Right.
So I was actually forecasting space needs in our distribution network and when we were
Wow.
going to need larger space. And then what we did is we actually backed that back. So, everything in lean tells us, well, we can do better, right? Like we're not
Yeah.
just going to make a bigger building. We got to do better. So that turned into a career of Kaizen facilitation where I was going to these distribution centers and I was working on material flow in space. It was like,
Huh.
how do we get more space out of this area? How do we make this process better so that we could really extend our time in
Right.
facility
Yeah.
and not have to break out from an infrastructure perspective. And so that kind of gave me more of a global sense of how this network worked with each other, et cetera.
Mhm.
And took me into an inventory role after that, where really my job was actually setting up space to implement a WMS. We didn't have a WMS.
Okay.
Again, no scanners to scanners.
Right.
And then, and really because you had terminals, you had different things that you had to use with the WMS. We had to make sure our material flow and our process was really tight so that when we layered a system on top of it, we wouldn't have errors. So that was my role for a really long time. And then from there, I was working at Toyota right when our large recession hit around 2008, 2009. Automotive really took a hit. We were one of the first people on the curve to take a hit. I decided to take a role as a logistics analyst, so going into transportation,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Trucks at Hilti North America. And I
Okay.
didn't, that was cool because it's construction. So I was in charge of carrier procurement,
That's
logistics
hard.
design, and all
Construction
for,
is hard.
yeah, and for delivering to a construction site, which one
Mhm.
construction sites don't have addresses, by the way.
No,
Like how do you get to a construction site? And we were like meeting, Joe Taylor on this side of the construction site, and we were partnering with couriers. And honestly, when we talk about on-time delivery, right,
Mhm.
customer service, think about a construction site that has a big crane
Yep.
and they only have that crane for 5 hours. You
Right.
have to be able to get the fasteners or whatever the material is to them
Mhm.
within that time frame. So a
Yeah.
lot of work on like analytics on how we were getting there, at
Mhm.
what time were our service providers doing the best for us at the best cost. And then I also did some large network optimization from an inventory flow perspective while I was
Okay.
there. Um, so had a lot to learn from like logistics and network
Mhm.
perspective in transportation. I got to get to know carrier, things
Nice.
that I know that you have experience in, like things
Yeah.
you don't always get exposure to.
Yeah.
And the other thing I learned at Hilti at the time, they didn't have a great lean culture, continuous improvement culture, and I felt very stuck. I didn't feel like I had the autonomy to solve my own
Okay.
problems. I didn't feel like I could go and learn about different things the same way I felt at Toyota.
Right.
And I started doing a lot of research on, well, what do I want to do, right? Like, where do I want to
Right.
be?
Yeah.
Where do I want to spend my time? And I knew I wanted to go back to a lean culture. And I started researching companies. And at the time, there was a startup, they were about probably 4 years old, called Lean Core Supply Chain Group. And they had a model where they have training and education, consulting, and third-party logistics.
Mhm.
And I ended up going to a training course and learned about how they were applying lean principles to the end-to-end supply chain, which I had never like
Thought about,
my
right? Because
yes,
you were in
my
different
mind was like,
parts of it. And that's a lot of times in that period of time that you were doing this, It was very siloed.
Yes.
Hmm.
Yes. And so they were really taking an end-to-end approach. And I thought that was fascinating. And I was like, well, I'm going to work for these folks because they were cool, they were young, they were new, and they were had a new approach I hadn't seen in the market before.
Awesome.
Um, and ended up like kind of hanging out on their website for a couple months trying to figure out when they had a spot available, applied to a position, and ended up getting a different role through that application process to implement a lean supply chain end to end for a furniture retailer here in Minneapolis.
Cool.
And I got to learn about the big problem we were solving was again customer. Their biggest problem was a customer came in and their number one detractor was material availability, meaning I came in and I wanted this thing tomorrow and it
Yeah.
wasn't available tomorrow. So my job was how do we flow material from supplier, right? How do we
Yeah.
create visibility and process
Yeah.
and systems to flow material just in time, right? Without loading the barn of inventory. How do we get the right inventory strategy and the right logistics strategy to eradicate that cause? How do we get the material to the customer when they want it? And in about 5 years' time, we were able to do that. That reason went
Nice.
away, and learned a ton, right? I got the exposure. I got to basically sit at the table with the CEO, the leadership of the organization, and really harness the strategy through. And that was incredible. It was so hard. I think I cried a couple times, but it
Only
was
a couple?
at least.
Well, okay. And so let me just pause you there for a second
Hmm.
because you're at the table, right? Are you
Yeah,
the only woman in the room?
I was one of two, I think, at the time.
So
Yeah,
how did that all go? And
yeah,
you're leading the charge on this really critical point
yeah.
that makes or breaks an organization.
Well, luckily, right, I was surrounded by a leader that believed in me. My customer, honestly, I'm sitting at the table with my customer. These aren't even
Right.
my
No, that's what I
employers.
mean. Yeah.
Yeah. And I had great relationships. I had taken the time to make relationships with the people at the table, and they
Mhm.
valued my opinion, which makes a difference
It
when
does.
you're a woman. When someone wants to listen to you, respects your space, and really is taking and wants to hear what your thoughts are. And that's been a common theme in my career success is
Okay.
I've always had people around me that want to hear from me. Um,
Okay.
the moment I didn't, I'm out
Why
of
do you
there.
think that is? Like, what have you done? Like, what is it that somebody can do
Great
to make
question.
sure that they kind of have the same experience as you? Because, it doesn't happen for everybody. Yes,
Right.
there's a bit of a component of, those people need to be the right people around you.
Hmm.
Um, but there's still a component of you that makes that difference. And so what is it that you think that that is and what people can do?
I think something that I'm really good at is honestly getting to know people, right? We just talked about how like we feel like we've known each other for like
Yes.
I feel like I'm an easy person to talk to, and that
Mhm.
skill lended myself to getting to know the people
Mhm.
behind the work and then helping me understand how to communicate effectively with those people so
Okay.
that they would hear me, right?
Communication.
Like kind of meet them where they are as a human and then get to
Yeah.
know each other and have empathy for one another, that we are building something together. They're a teammate, right? They're part of our community. So we have to kind of get to know people, and we also have to be vulnerable and let people get to know us. That's, I
Yeah.
think, something that's hard for a lot of people. When people know you and know your thoughts and you're transparent with them, I think people respect that at the
Mhm.
end of the day. And I think that's something, a skill, or I don't know if it's a skill or an attribute, but it's a valuable thing to have, is just connecting with someone as a human.
Well, and I think too, a lot of what you're talking about as well is curiosity. You spent a
Yes.
lot of time really learning about a variety of different things so that when you were put into that position, you could really bring that knowledge to the table to really come up with those solutions and command that
Yes.
respect.
Yeah, seek to understand, like when we talk about career growth and
Yeah.
development, seeking to understand is such a huge part of anyone's job and will set you apart.
Right.
Um, don't assume you know the answers, like really come in and truly try to seek to understand what people are wanting, what their viewpoints are, and really inquire, like, what does this mean? And like, I spent a lot of time when I joined that furniture retailer, I really spent a lot of time understanding their business and their
Mhm.
brand, and like, how do I play a role in making them successful in this business?
Yeah.
And how does that correlate to a strategy in their supply
And
chain?
I think also, like, what do they understand about supply chain? Like, what are the gaps in their knowledge that I can bring to the table to really help them better understand and even, help them become that even more successful organization?
That's exactly right. And like, honestly, some people often are looking for an outside lens, and the people that have had a long time in supply chain, we've seen a lot, right? We kind of understand. I have this principle, that us people in supply chain, and honestly in logistics and transportation, we see the we see the impact of business decisions,
Mhm.
right? So a business decision might be made up here. We may want to market the hell out of this futon for
Right.
college season.
Yeah.
Well, what does that do, right? It all
Mhm.
manifests itself into the
It
supply
does.
chain, right? The way we have to bend over backwards to get a container in, then we
Mhm.
load the barn, we put it all in our warehouse, and then we got to bleed it out. Like, that impacts our labor, that impacts our trucks, that
Mhm.
impacts a lot of things. So we have a really unique view. Like, for anyone that's working supply chain, feel confident in the fact that you actually see what's going on
Mhm.
in the business. And if we can do it right, if we can tell the story right, we can influence business strategy based
Right.
on what's happening in the supply
Mhm.
chain.
Amazing. Amazing. So how did you end up at Sleep Number?
So I ended up Sleep Number. So we during COVID at Lean Core, if you can imagine being a small company that moves stuff,
Mhm.
when your customers stop moving stuff, you get a little scared, right?
Right.
Um, so we got a little nervous. We were a family-owned company. Um, we um, we were kind of thinking about, what does this mean for us? We were in the stage of our technology. We also produced our own technology, our TMS, that our technology probably would have needed a significant investment to
Okay.
continue on the path that we needed. So we ended up making the decision to sell to a strategic organization, Transplace at the time, which is now Uber Freight. And in that transition, I had talked earlier about people wanting my opinion and
Mhm.
feeling valued. I walked into a culture that didn't respect my opinion,
Okay.
didn't want my viewpoint, even though we had created this company that made an impact immediately to their
Right.
P&L.
Mhm.
No big deal. But I just didn't feel listened to. I didn't feel respected. And
Mhm.
I immediately needed to make a change for myself, right? I didn't feel like this was my community. The other piece of it was, we had this approach that we wanted to be end-to-end supply chain people. I felt like we went to an organization that was very commodity driven transportation. And like, principally, that wasn't aligning to my values.
So this
Um,
is a very important point to just take a
yeah,
pause for a second because you have said three major things there.
yeah.
I didn't feel valued.
Hmm.
It didn't align with my principles, and I knew that I had to make a move.
Yeah,
Now, the reason why I pause here is because these are really, really big deals. I don't
yeah,
want to just gloss over it because a lot of time we feel a lot of different things, but we don't do anything about it. And this is the second time that you've said this in the
yeah.
moves that you've made within your careers. And so I want to reiterate to everybody who's listening is your intuition, how
Hmm.
you're feeling, being in tune with what it is that's working for you and what's not working for you. Being principled doesn't have to mean that you're a bad person
No.
for wanting to go and seek out more for yourself. And it
Yeah,
doesn't mean that the organization is a bad organization. It just means that there's not a fit. And when there's
yep,
not a fit, you can't do your best work and they can't get the best out of you either. And so
yeah,
it actually makes more sense for you as an individual and the organizations that you've served for you to do what's right for you. And so I
yeah.
just want to pause there and make that point because too many times we sit in a position that doesn't do anybody any justice.
That's exactly right. And we talked a little bit about this before we started this
Yeah.
this segment, but um w- it is so, work is part of life. It's not work-life balance.
Yeah.
We are just, this is life. And you have to be surrounded by a community that you're enjoying, that is getting the best out of you, that you feel the best at. you can be yourself, you can bring your authentic self to work every day.
Mhm.
And two, it's like fun. You want to be surrounded by fun people. This is life. Like, let's have fun. We're with these people 8 hours a day.
Yeah.
Like,
Yes.
let's or
Sometimes
more.
more, right?
So let's have fun. Like, let's make sure you have to make sure that it's aligning to you and your life. And there will be parts of your life, and I'm sure I will experience it again, where your life may change in a different way and
Mhm.
your values and principles may shift. And that's okay. In that moment, have confidence in what you're feeling and have confidence in your abilities. I think a lot of us feel like we don't have the right abilities to make a change or whatever, but I can tell you, like, what you've learned, especially in supply chain, is going to be valuable, and
Mhm.
you just have to find the right fit for you
Yeah.
when you're not having fun anymore.
Yeah, and we've got a blended episode coming up later this month about parenthood, and we talk about this. We talk about whether it's work-life balance or, whether it's really the organization that needs to help balance
Yes.
somebody holistically in their lifestyle.
Hmm.
And, if you need daycare at work because that's what works for you, there's organizations out there that provide it.
That's
Don't
exactly
get
right.
stuck in an organization that doesn't, and your anxiety is through the roof because you have to get to, or it's going to cost you so much money. Like, these are all the different things that we've talked about. And I think organizations looking at people holistically and also understanding that this is how they're making those decisions, that's a big deal. And I don't think that they think about that too much, right? And I think
Yeah.
we need to think about that a little bit more.
Absolutely. I mean, one thing I look for, and I looked for when I moved to Sleep Number, was how they treat their people from a benefits perspective, from an inclusion perspective, and what their thoughts were about bringing your best self to work and how work relates with life. And that's not only important for myself, but it's important in attracting top talent and diverse teams. I um, I have a diverse team, and I have a team. Um, Something that I'm most proud of, my team gave me feedback and an engagement score that 100% of them feel comfortable showing up as they are to work, meaning they don't
Yeah.
feel like they have to be a different person,
Love
whatever.
it.
And for me to bring someone into my organization, I have to feel confident that they can feel their best, which means I have to look out for companies that have benefits, not only that benefit myself, but benefit people that aren't like me.
And that are gonna
And
work for your team, like, that
yes,
are gonna
and
be
that are going to
part of
be,
that team that you're gonna build, and, I
yeah,
mean, it all starts with sleep.
yeah,
Right? I mean, you can't be a company that promotes sleep and doesn't do any of the rest of it because it
yes.
does all start with a good night's sleep.
Yes, we are a wellness company. We truly believe like everyone needs to be sleeping on our bed so they get the best night's sleep,
Yes.
because that's where it starts. That's where we're rested. So
Yeah.
we value wellness. We value wellness in the individual, family, financial wellness. We talk about financial wellness a lot at Sleep Number. Just again, these are all things that enable you to be your best self, starting with sleep, right? When you get a really
Mhm.
nice time, really nice deep sleep, you feel great going to work. You feel like you're engaging with your kids all of a sudden, right? They're not annoying you. You're like, oh, you're cool. Let's talk. There's like all these things that hinge off of sleep. And that's what, I mean, really attracted me to Sleep Number. And then honestly, like, again, going back to having fun at work, as I was working through the interview processes at a couple companies, I really liked the people. I was like, these people are cool. Let's have these people
Yeah.
seem like they would value my opinion and I value theirs, and there's a mutual respect, and it's going to be fun. So,
Good. So is that 100% score one of the things that you're most proud of? What are some of the things that you can really look back on your career and so far and be the most proud of?
yeah. So that has been my most recent thing that I'm most proud of. That is, as I've developed in my career and understood, right? We talked about my values and what I
Yeah.
cared about. What I cared about very clearly through my career is being able to show up as myself. I just want to be me,
Yeah.
and I'm really good when I'm me, right? Like that's kind of it. And I need my team members to show up that way because they have to be good. Because we're going to be the best, right? Like we're the best team. Anyway, so but that was really encouraging for me to see that, and I hope it stays that way. I hope people continue to feel that way. And then, I was nominated for top women in logistics,
Yes, you
and
were top 10.
yeah,
Congratulations.
and thank you. And what was cool about that is in some of the comments, they talked about me being kind of an approachable and transparent leader. And I believe, right, there are nuances to this in business, but I I firmly believe in bringing my team along and being transparent with them, either in my expectations, where we need to do better, etc., because it's the only way people get better. And something that I experienced in my career were sometimes leaders that kind of block you from certain things, which actually don't give me the picture that I need to
Yeah,
excel in my role.
yeah,
And so that's kind of the two values that I really try to bring to the table. And transparency, honestly, is me, right? That's part of me being able to be me,
yeah.
is being kind of recognized as someone that's transparent and that's going to bring you along, but also allow you to be your best self at work.
Yeah. Cleo Wade says, I think it's real leaders lead with love. And I
Yeah,
love that saying because love doesn't have to mean that you're like gushing over them and being like, I love you. But
right.
like love can be in the form of acceptance. It can be in the form of empathy. It can be in the form of transparency and authenticity and
Yeah,
just showing up as yourself and treating people as the humans that they are,
yeah,
right?
right.
And meeting them where they are as well,
Mhm.
which I think is really, really important and just goes to show how much of, a leader you are and why you're so respected in the industry. It's not only the knowledge and everything that you bring to the table, it's that you're showing up as yourself and you're allowing others to do the same.
Yeah, exactly.
So what has your experience been? I know we talked a little bit about being the second woman or
Mhm.
the one of two women at the table, but throughout the career,
Mhm.
what has it been like? Because obviously Toyota automotive is very male dominated,
Mhm.
construction is very male dominated. Did you experience anything really being a woman in some of those male dominated fields, especially being our age? Supply chain
Yeah,
has also been very male dominated as well. Was there
yeah.
anything that you experienced or maybe a story you want to share, or even some advice from some of the experiences that you've had that you want to share with others?
Yes, I would say find your community that respects you, but also don't take things personally.
Right.
I
That's
um
hard.
right. Culture and history has what set up this system that isn't
Mhm,
always built or friendly for women. And you have to remember that. And you also need to speak up and advocate for yourself when
mhm,
appropriate. I have a story I will never forget. I was the senior leader on for this customer. Um, I was meeting a new person, a new leader at this customer, and I flew down to good old Alabama and was meeting with this customer with one of my peers. And he was a male. And I will never forget having a whole conversation where he did not look at me once.
Oh, that has happened to me way too many times.
He was looking at my male counterpart, talking to him about stuff that was my job.
Right.
And I just sat there like, come on, like what in the world? Am I
Right.
invisible? Like this is
What in
crazy.
the world?
What in the world? And I was able to address that with my male colleague because he and I had an existing relationship that we felt very open and honest about, and he helped advocate for me after that.
Mhm,
So I was able to speak up to myself with the person that I trusted and felt comfortable with. Um, but that'll happen, right? Like that happened to me a lot. I had a male leader at one of my organizations tell me I need to wear more lipstick at a customer presentation.
wow.
And at that point, I advocated for myself. And guess what? Like that person didn't work for our company for very much longer, right? The good news is if you find a community that you believe in, that you feel safe in, the bad stuff will weed itself out. Things will
That's
get
true.
better. And I've also took it on myself. I have to be the leader that shows other leaders what diverse teams can do.
Mhm,
I have to advocate for women. I have to advocate for any person that's been othered in any way, like that's my responsibility because I know how it feels like.
Yeah.
And so, and when now that I'm part of these rooms that are male dominated, I have to speak up. I cannot be quiet, which that takes a lot of courage and has
Does.
built over time. Like I wasn't able to do that when I was 18,
Right.
but I'm sure, like, I don't know, I have a lot of faith in this generation behind us. I bet you those women are, I don't know, like, I think they're probably rocking it at that, but um,
They're
it
better.
will,
Do you know what they're better at? They're better at
what are they better?
boundaries,
They're so good at boundaries,
right?
right? And
Like I am in awe because like right now I'm navigating boundaries.
yes, we weren't taught that. Like we really weren't taught that. But boundaries are important for anyone's career. You should
Very
definitely
important.
look into that. But the you just have to have the courage to speak up. And again, if it doesn't work out in your favor, then that's not the community you want to be part of. Like
Yeah.
it's just like that's the boundary, right?
Watch the red
Um,
flags.
mhm,
Pay
yeah,
attention to the red flags because one
yeah,
day they're gonna hit you in the face and then you're gonna be like, now what?
yes, exactly, exactly. So,
That is so funny. It actually happened to me probably about 6 months ago. I was on like a prep call for something, and this person would only address the males in the room.
oh
And
my
I
God,
was the one that was supposed to be conducting the conversation, like
you're like, hello,
hosting and moderating the conversation.
right?
And I was like, wait a second, is this 2022? I'm not
Yeah.
entirely like, is this the what, Twilight Zone? Because I'm not entirely sure where I am right now.
It's crazy.
Yeah,
It's
like
crazy.
just address them. And it was virtual, it wasn't in person. And so that's how obvious it was. Because I was like, how is this conversation gonna actually go?
Unbelievable.
Because I don't know if he's gonna like listen to me or whatever, which
Unbelievable.
was just kind of crazy. So what's your favorite thing about your career or maybe supply chain in general? What's your,
Oh,
you
well,
know,
my favorite thing about supply chain in general is honestly, it's so you can learn so much. You will never
mhm,
get bored. And you can do all sorts of things in supply chain.
yeah,
And it really lends itself to a lot of different skills.
mhm,
And I think that's very cool. I think it's cool that back when I was in college, I didn't even know what supply chain was, right? And now there's whole degrees on it, and
right,
people are finding it more important. Oh no, we're just the protectors of gross margin. No big deal,
right.
right?
No
Um,
big deal.
um, but yeah, like and I think what's shaping out is this importance of supply chain. This we we again we see what how business manifests itself
Mhm,
from a P&L perspective, and we have a lot of knowledge because of that. And
mhm,
I think that's very exciting. You can have a really broad view of business even when you're working within supply chain. And
mhm.
I think that's really exciting. And really exciting if you get bored because you can just go over there and try something else. Try
Yeah, and
inventory.
try something
Try,
else.
yeah.
That's so true. And we're the protectors, I think, of sustainability too,
Yes.
because
Yes.
every road of sustainability leads back to what we do in supply chain.
Yes.
And, a lot of emissions and everything does come from supply chain. So not only are we the protector of those gross margins, we're also the protector and the leader and the one who can make the most impact in sustainability. And I know that that's something that is important to you. So, final thoughts on that. What do you want to share?
Well, we talked a lot about humanity and community,
Mhm.
and because we source, make, and move the stuff, right? We have to consider what that is doing to our local communities, and often our communities that our people are working
Yeah.
in, right? We have people that are part of our community working in these areas that potentially we are doing harm to.
Yeah.
And we have to look at that and go, well, is that the right thing? It's
Mhm.
not. And in my experience, a lot of what we can do from a sustainability perspective over time is really good for that gross margin. It's really good for cost.
Yeah.
Um, and we need to be rethinking how we're impacting the world because like as much as business and capitalism is about making money, I think we're at this tipping point in the world where we that can't be it. We can't do that at the expense of humanity. Like we're not. killing the world, we're killing humanity.
Right.
So
Mhm.
let's if we want to be selfish for a second, this is about sustaining humanity.
Yeah,
And nothing is worth humans, in my opinion,
absolutely.
and animals. But you know what I'm saying? Like
Yes.
this is, and we've just got to think about our world very differently. And I believe profit and sustainability, frankly, go hand in hand. And I think we've proven that over time.
Yeah.
Um,
Well, and we've got a lot of responsibility as supply chain professionals. And I think it's really important that we find our voice because we're
mhm.
advocating for a lot of different things. We're
Yeah.
advocating for sustainability, we're advocating for diversity and inclusion, we're advocating for that bottom line.
Yep.
We're advocating and making like the impact that we make as supply chain professionals, I think we gloss over way too much, and we are too important to the business, to the environment, to the planet, that we really need to remember that and
Yep.
remind ourselves of how important supply chain and supply chain professionals really are to the world. So I have loved this conversation. I mean, everybody knows how passionate I am about sustainability and inclusion, and it's, just so nice to have a conversation with somebody who is like-minded, like
Yeah.
me, and agrees that we can live very harmoniously with supply chain. We just need, more people like yourself to really champion that. And I have loved this. I mean, I think you and I
Yeah.
think along the same
I
lines,
know.
and we're passionate about some of the same things. And this was a really great conversation. Ashley, thank you for, having the courage and being brave to be authentically you, and for coming on and sharing that with our audience today.
Yeah, absolutely, Sarah. It's my pleasure and always love talking. So thank you for having
Yep.
me.
We're gonna have to do it again.